Welcome to Federation CJ's 360 podcast, the pulse of Montreal's Jewish community.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this exclusive conversation about what is going on in Israel currently. We have with us a number of guests, distinguished guests, who are going to be able to convey information and their feelings of what's happening on the ground in Israel today, which is obviously troubling and a different world than we had woken up to even on October 7th. And since October 7th, the way that we have as a Jewish community and a Jewish world dealt with the situation has evolved tremendously. Back here in Montreal, we have and will continue, of course, to take care of our community security. We are very, very keenly aware and spending enormous resources, human capital and other, to deal with the fact that we have a number of people in Israel, including a group of young adults who participate in the Journey of Hope, traveled from Poland to Israel to learn about the Shoah, and now are in Israel, sitting in Jerusalem, awaiting the opportunity to leave. And we have the chairs of the program who are going to share with us some of their thoughts and experiences over the past few days since really Thursday night Montreal time or Friday morning Israel time, when Israel launched its operation in Iran. Maybe we'll start with Dov and Marnie. Tell us about your experience since really last Friday morning in Israel.
Well, we arrived in Israel. Our first step was going to the Nova site. And then that night we went to Machane Yehuda, had a great time. And then when everyone was going to bed, that's when the fun started.
I guess I just want to say that the kids have been unbelievably mature, calm. They're used to our routine. They feel safe. They feel secure. They know that Montreal's Federation is working every avenue to bring us back home. The staff have been incredible. They're calm. We're entertaining the kids. The kids are entertaining themselves, creating programming. At this point, it feels like we're at summer camp. And we're so grateful to have Stephen Rabinovich, who is leading us all. He keeps us calm. He's dealing with all the parents, and he's just so positive. And we really are, we're safe. We feel safe. We're in a nice hotel. We have good food, and we're getting outside. We're creating activities. We even got the kids' laundry done. We're good.
And most importantly, we feel so supported by the Montreal, our friends and Federation, and we know that we're not alone here, and it's really comforting to know that.
Thank you guys so much. First and foremost, you guys are leaders, chairing an incredibly important program on behalf of the Montreal Jewish community. And, you know, you're away from your families. You have to deal with your own stress in this situation and shoulder that of an additional 65 young adults and chaperones and Holocaust survivors who are with you. So I think on our behalf to say thank you for your incredible leadership. It's incredibly important to us to recognize it and to thank you and to know that we're doing everything to bring you home. That is a certainty. We hope that very soon that will happen. And for the next couple days or however long it takes, that you may experience more quiet than jogs or runs into a bomb shelter. So I thank you guys on behalf of the Montreal Jewish community. Keep on doing the great work you're doing. I will do the introduction. Adil, you're not under siren, right?
No, not as far as I know. I haven't received any notification on the application, so
okay.
We're good.
Wonderful. And we actually met almost at a couple months after the war began. We had a mission in Israel with our board of directors, looking really at the investments that we've made. One of them, and not insignificant, is in post-trauma, PTSD, and therapy for so many Israelis that have today been subject to what's been going on since October 7th. Maybe tell us a little bit about Healthy Minds and the work that you're doing, because I think it's important for our community to understand how this ties into today's conversation as much as it tied into the post-October 7th conversation, and how important that investment has been.
Correct. So firstly, it's really nice to meet you all, and to say thank you. Let's start with that. And I explained what our mission was. Our mission was essentially to provide psychiatry services to anyone that needed it, who was displaced from the north or the south of Israel. Okay, that was our initial goal, and so he straight away stepped in, and you guys did it. You guys were the first seed funders of this opportunity, and because of that, we've been very, very successful and been able to provide psychiatry services to done over 17,500 psychiatric sessions for patients, in the last 15 months alone, which is a tremendous number of psychiatric sessions. I actually also had the privilege of meeting Dove and the team and the students actually today. We ran a workshop for them, for the students around resilience, where we did an hour and a half of a workshop around the tools to deal with resilience, what resilience means. And it was very, very encouraging to see, as you heard before, the students are very mature. They're definitely embracing the challenge, and they're also they've got tools in order to be able to deal with the challenges that they're facing here. So it's really, really nice to meet the community. Not in this scenario, but again, we're happy we could help. So maybe briefly, if it's okay with you, I'll just share my screen just to show you a few pointers as to what we've done, since we started this project together. Okay, so Healthy Mind is a virtual psychiatry service, and just to give you an idea of what the challenges are, and some of the challenges are not that dissimilar to what you have in Canada today. You have very limited psychiatrists in general, globally. There's 10 psychiatrists to every 100,000 patients in Israel. The waiting list to get to a psychiatrist through the public healthcare system in Israel is around 6 months, and now it's closer to 9 months. And there's a challenge around no continuum of care when it comes to therapy and psychiatry. When you overlay that with the challenge around October 7th, where the demand just blew up, we have over 12x demand for mental health services. You had during October 7th, the first 6 to 12 months, you had over 250,000 people displacing 400 hotels. And in addition to that, now 93% of the population of the South and the North have gone back home. They're reliving October 7th again. And that's also prior to the issues of the challenge that we've had with Iran as of Thursday night. But the challenge with Iran has only exacerbated the situation. And we, for example, in the first 2 days since we attacked Iran, have received over 300 to 400, requests from new patients to see psychiatrists. So these are just overarching challenges that we faced when October 7th happened. And I just want to go straight to the results. And the results are that we've seen over 4,000 patients. We've done over 17,500 clinical sessions for these patients. The most important element here, that we're seeing patients within 3.5 days from the time they reach out to us, versus, like I said, the 6 to 9 month waiting list that they have with their public HMO, which is unheard of. And the care that we're providing is very, very high standard. We're getting over 91% patient satisfaction, both from a clinical and from a service perspective. And we're supporting over 850 therapists who are referring patients to us on a daily basis. We're seeing over 350 new patients a month, but we're servicing over 1,000 patients a month when it comes to follow-up sessions and intakes. So it's really important to highlight. And all of this is due to the initial seed funding that you guys have given us in order to support this. And this is totally free for the people from the South and the North of Israel. I just also want to explain to you that the distribution for the patient population is not just in a specific city in the South. For example, Sderot is the largest city, so they have 40,000 residents. The people that we've seen, over 46% of them come from Sderot. Dove and the students were down south, and they went to Sderot. They actually went to visit the police station Yair, which I remember I saw you at. Opposite that is where the Resilience Center is that we work with. Shara Negev and Stot Negev are around 17%. Eshkol, which is the most impacted communities from October 7th. We have around 90% of the patients that we're seeing are coming from Eshkol. And then we've also got 6% from the north, because it's a much, much more dispersed space, but we're seeing 6% of the population from the north, also the patients that we're seeing. And the diagnosis breakdown also is quite interesting. Let's take into account that these people have been facing trauma in these communities in the north and the south for over 20 plus years. So it's not surprising that their diagnosis is primarily PTSD. And there's different modules of therapy that are applied to that, whether it's EMDR, CBT, DBT, or ACT therapeutic modules. And then we've also got a mixture of anxiety and depression, which are caked into this, unfortunately, which are longer term. In addition to that, we cover all age groups. It's really important to highlight. This is a digital service. It's a remote service. It's done by Zoom, similar to the call we're having now. And the concern was also how this would be dealt with when it came to an elderly population. As you can see, over 15% of the people that we're seeing are over 60 plus. The largest segment is 31 to 45, who are traditionally parents of kids. And that's also very important. So the impact we're having, not just dealing with the parents, but the impact we're having is also across all the family structure. We also, by the way, have a service for adolescents of 12 to 18-year-olds. And the gender distribution is male to female, 65% female and 35% male. Ari, one last thing I wanted to mention, because you did mention the similarities between October 7th and now. Not much has changed, unfortunately, when it comes to the need. The need has only grown bigger, and now because of what's going on with Iran, the population that's going to need this is even greater, because it's not just the north and the south that are impacted, it's pretty much the whole country at this point. So this is an ongoing challenge. And one of the goals I want to highlight is that our endeavor is to integrate this service into the public healthcare system, so it's not funded by philanthropic money. And we're already at a point where we're 25% engaged now with the HMO here at Maccabi. They cover 25% of the population, and we're now working towards getting integrated into the other HMOs. So potentially within the next 6 to 8 months, any Israeli that is part of the public healthcare system will be able to access our service in a very, very timely manner of within less than a week to be able to see a psychiatrist, rather than 6 to 9 months. And that's all due to the fact that you guys donated the seed funding for this. So this has been a tremendous success when it comes to mental health services across the country. So thank you very, very, very much. And I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to to highlight the success.
Personally, I want to thank you because it's interesting that so often we don't get to hear from those who are on the ground actually doing such incredible stuff in Israel today. You're a good partner to have here, because the impact you've had is so incredible, and really we thank you for that. And we wish you continued success down with your journey and with the government. I know that you'll have great impact, and I thank you for that. Gil, may I introduce you?
Sure.
How do you introduce a friend? I've had the privilege of working with Gil Troy for 23 years, not to age either of us. It's a long time.
I was 12 and you were 5.
There we go. Beyond the fact that there is no greater advocate for Israel and Zionism and the Jewish people, someone who I admire, read, and every morning I seem to wake up to a new call. I don't know when you produce all of this, but another brilliant column that you've written that not only expresses what's happening in a true way, but also tries to move the agenda of where we need to go. So I'm not going to read your official bio, because I don't think it does service to who you are for the Montreal Jewish community, and of course the fact that you are part of the Montreal Jewish community still. I don't think you've left. So I thank you for that, and maybe we'll just have like a back and forth conversation. Firstly, how are you? Most importantly.
Surprisingly fine. There's a weird thing. I remember the years that I lived in Montreal when Israel was in tension. It was in some ways harder to be there than here, because when you hear 3 things happen, one is that you tell your own story and you're sort of in charge. You're not just passive. Second, you have all kinds of amazing input, some of which I'll tell you in a second. You have inspirational moments. And third, you don't just get that constant bombardment of negative news. And I think Dov and Marnie can confirm this for me in IDL too, that there's a weird kind, and we're also now having this very surreal experience where most of the day is quite quiet. And then every now and then there are these booms. Also, we in Jerusalem are spoiled because there have been far fewer rockets here in Jerusalem than elsewhere. But just to put everything in context, Arya is in the south. So he's, I think, The distance between him and me is less than you in Montreal and Saint Agathe. But he's in a shelter and we're not. And so we all sort of also cut our potatoes however we can so that we can feel good and feel, and because the key is by reacting and by telling our own story. And it also helps explain the morale of our troops, of our kids, of my kids, because they're doing something. They're not paralyzed, because they're not stuck. They're not paralyzed. And then when I look at your community, which is our community, which is my community, I'm just so amazed by the generosity and the love. And I don't think you realize just how much we need it. The more we get bashed in the media, the more we feel alone. You make sure that we're not alone. And it's extraordinary. It's been interesting for me over the last year and a half to see how my Israeli friends, who aren't like me back and forth and in connection with so many wonderful people like you, are really appreciating it more than ever, just this amazing embrace. So just keep on doing what you're doing. And thank you.
Thank you, Gil. You always have an amazing way to bring it back to home. Let's just talk about where we are today, because, and of course, post October 7th, there's so much to talk about, whether it's Hezbollah, whether it's Syria, whether it's Hamas, and so on. So, but this operation doesn't start yesterday, right? This is something in the making for so long. How did we get here? And again, what are we trying to achieve during this war?
To speak broadly, and I think it's really important that we speak to our Iranian exile friends, our Persian Jews, and learn from them. Until 1979, there was actually an extraordinary connection between the Persian people and the Jewish people, and between the country of Iran, which was a Muslim country, the second Muslim country in the world to recognize the state of Israel in 1950, and Israel. And it was the revolution, the Khomeinian revolution, that turned that good relationship into the disaster that is today. Now think about it. What we're seeing now is kind of anti-Zionist anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic anti-Zionism at its essence. Tehran is 1,000 miles away from where I speak. Why are they so concerned with us? Why were the Houthis bombing us? Why has Iran invested so much money and so much energy and now is absorbing so many blows and showing to the whole world that it's a paper tiger? We see how powerful the hatred is. When you are that obsessed with the Jewish people and the Jewish state, and you try to use that to kind of keep your regime together, you're ultimately willing to sacrifice anything and everything. And we've seen the cost that it has to the regime. I'm incredibly annoyed, even by many of my fellow Jews whom I love, who keep on calling this a preemptive strike. This is not a preemptive strike. Those of us who remember April 13th, 360 rockets and missiles and drones coming after us. Never before have so many intercontinental ballistic missiles just be sent to civilians. And then October 1st, the largest ballistic missile attack on civilians in history, 200 ballistic missiles. And so Israel, if there was nothing else in the story, if Iran hadn't been promising genocide for years and years and denying the Holocaust and demonizing the Jews and organizing all kinds of terror and trying to create a ring of terror around Israel, if none of that had happened, and if the Iranians weren't rushing toward a nuclear attack, just those two assaults justify what Israel's doing. But the fact that they have been rushing to nuclear, and let's point out, President Trump gave them 60 days, and Israel's attack came on the 61st day. We have allowed diplomacy to not just play out, but for them to use it to run out the clock. And we just saw a briefing from CENTCOM, which is the key generals in the United States of America, and they said that Iran was weeks away from a nuclear weapon. My son, Yoni, said to me, he's serving up north, he said, I'm so proud on Friday. He said, I'm so proud what we did Thursday night. And I'm so proud because we are doing what the West needs to have done. We are doing America's dirty work. We are doing Canada's dirty work. And it's painful that not enough Americans and Canadians appreciate that. And that's where you come in. You have to learn the facts, all of you on the phone, and all of your kids and all of your grandkids. And you have to have the uncomfortable conversations. And you have to explain why we're doing what we're doing. This isn't some military adventure, as the New York Times columnist Nicholas Kristof called it. We're not looking for another war. We're looking for peace. It's they who attacked us, and they repeatedly attacked us and repeatedly threatened us, and they who are now paying the price. And hopefully the world will understand that. And we saw that, go back to 1981 when Israel destroyed the the Iraqi nuclear plant in Osirak. And everybody said, even Ronald Reagan, who loved Israel, said, how dare you? And there was a UN Security Council resolution which the United States didn't veto. How dare you? And then, less than a decade later, Dick Cheney signed a picture of that destroyed Osirak nuclear site and gave it to the head of the Israeli Air Force at the time and said, thank you, because our job in handling Saddam Hussein and fighting the Persian Gulf War is made easier by what you did. Israel doesn't do it for thank you, but we know that eventually we will have it. And I am sure, and I know how many Arab leaders, how many Iranians who were oppressed by this insane government, how many people all over the world are in their hearts saying thank you. And maybe one of these days they'll get around to learn that amazing Hebrew expression that I keep on using for your amazing community, Toda Rabah.
Gil, it's so interesting. When you look at what's going on and you consider that we're seeing very little condemnation from the Arab world and condemnation coming from Europe, you understand there's a misbalance here. And of course, President Trump playing a very interesting role here, almost trying to balance a negotiation in between threats. You're a historian of American politics. How do you see that playing out?
I have no idea. Anybody who thinks that they know what's going on in Donald Trump's head doesn't know the latest thing he's going to see. It could be some Fox News report. It could be some memo from J.D. Vance. But having said that, first of all, let's step back. And I know we're on a Canadian call with Canadian content, but I really have to say God bless America, especially America. I have to say thank you to the United States of America, both under Joe Biden and under Donald Trump, which has, with ups and downs, of course, but consistently supported Israel during this last year and a half. And it's been so important. And right now, what we're seeing is a bit of a dance. I mean, a week and a half ago, and I'm very careful, I never predict because they only remember when the historian is wrong, not when the historian is right. But even a week and a half ago, I was just saying, again, I don't know. In other words, I know enough to know I don't know. I said even then, I don't know if there's some kind of game where Trump and Netanyahu are pretending to be in tension so that Trump can use the threat of an Israeli attack to get the Iranians to advance in the negotiations. But the Iranians are very, very clear. They want to continue their rush toward go nuclear. And by the way, let's point out, this is an oil superpower. This is a gas superpower. Why do they need nuclear energy? They don't need nuclear energy. They need nuclear weapons. And so it's very important that we keep on telling the story of and acknowledging the good even while there's tension. Right now, there are all kinds of signs, but one of the things we are seeing in the last 48 hours is two things. One, a division in the Trump camp between the isolationists, the Tucker Carlson lunatics, and Trump. And Donald Trump called out Tucker Carlson, the isolationists who are saying, oh no, you're looking for a forever war. And by the way, let's be very clear. It's also, let's speak the language of the American right. The intention isn't for this to be a forever war. The intention isn't to occupy Iran. The intention isn't even to fix Iran. The intention is because the Iranians weren't willing to do it, and I should say the Iranian leadership wasn't willing to do it at the negotiating table, to destroy their nuclear project and impede it. We hope that the people of Iran will rise up. We hope that the Canadian government and the Norwegian government and the American government is doing what's necessary to help undermine this poisonous regime. But the goal of this war, Israel's goal also, is very specific, which is to stop an action. And that's very, very different than trying to fix Iraq or fix Afghanistan or change the world.
And I think that's a great observation, because at the end of the day, no one's looking for a forever war with Iran. I don't think that's a healthy dynamic for the entire world. I was asked recently on an interview I did for Le Devoir about, what happens if this goes nuclear. I mean, Iran has got some other bedfellows, right? China, Russia, North Korea. How do you see the dynamic playing out? The old Cold War, the East-West dynamic. How do you see that playing out?
So first of all, again, I'm an idiot. I just remember things. So I don't know. I grew up in a world where lefties were against nuclear proliferation. And a key tenet of the left was don't have so many nukes. And all of a sudden, when you have a rising nuclear power and an aspirational nuclear power that wants to attack the Jewish state, that's somehow okay. Similarly, I don't understand how my friends from the left cannot see how autocratic, theocratic, homophobic, sexist, oppressive Iran is. Similarly, I look at China. I look at Russia. Now, what's interesting is just as the Arab countries have been very quiet, China and Russia have been pretty quiet. There was apparently one 50-minute conversation between Putin and Trump, and they both, I think, would love to kind of come in and work out some kind of deal. But as you point out, the pressures on Israel on this one, compared to even what's going on in Gaza, have been very, very different. I think most people watching the world today know what a bad actor Iran has been. They know how destructive it has been. And let's point out there's something else. There's another rumor that has been spreading. I'm a historian, so I'm careful until I see the evidence, but I think it's important to understand what was in the Israeli head. There was a rumor that there was a battle plan from Iran to undermine the stable but always iffy countries of Egypt and Jordan, and then create a ring of fire around Israel and have a wave of pickup trucks, wave after wave of pickup trucks doing October 7th, not on one border, but on every one of the borders, while Iran and the Houthis would attack from afar. Now, especially after October 7th, but I would argue even October 6th, doesn't a responsible leader have to say, wait a minute? I have to make sure, especially given how many missiles they threw at me before, given how much they've done to me before, given how many threats. I always say, most Israelis, the more right-wing they are, the less racist or bigoted they are, because they take the words of Hamas seriously. They take the threats of Iran seriously. Who's more of a racist? Who's more bigoted? Somebody says, oh, they don't really mean that. They're just Muslims, which I don't say. Or they're people. I read their charters. I read their covenant. I read their words. I read their Holocaust denial. Boy, I better take that seriously. And I follow the cash. I follow the cash they spread all over the world, trying to kill Jews, trying to kill Westerners, trying to kill Canadians. So at what point are we the fools? At what point are we not defending ourselves? And that is a deeper issue. We have to have a conversation in the West about what are we willing to do to defend ourselves? What are we willing to do to recognize evil? I know we all want to live in a kumbaya world where everybody's lovely. It just so happens that there are lovely people and not lovely people. It just so happens there are democracies and autocracies. There are good governments, which have their imperfections, and there are toxic governments, which are perfectly evil. The Iranian people have been suffering under this perfectly evil government for so long. And we're hearing informally that many, many Iranians are thrilled by what we're doing. And the challenge really is how to build that energy so that the government falls not from Netanyahu and not from Trump, but from its own corruption and its own corrupt weight.
Gil, it's interesting. What you hear, the chants on the streets of Montreal. We F1, Formula One was in Montreal this weekend. Of course, what's the picture in the Palestinian protest downtown? And again, it's an anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, protest. And the chants are, Bibi's war, right? They're trying to. This is Bibi's war, but this is not Bibi's war. This is existential. How are we as a nation, as a Jewish nation, going to come out of this with a different conversation? Because we have to change that narrative, whether it's on campus, whether it's anywhere we're looking at. How are we going to be able to change that narrative?
So before I get to changing the narrative, let's look at some facts. Many Israelis have been calling Bibi a coward for years. Many Israelis have been criticizing him, including many from the left, the Israeli left, which is different than the Canadian left. Yair Lapid said, Ehud Barak said, what? This guy has been threatening Iran for years. He hasn't really taken care of it. And so this is a war that we try to avoid. But you're absolutely right. Let's talk historically. There are two kinds of wars that Israel has fought. There's the 48 war, which is ein brera, no choice, an existential conflict. And then there's, let's call it the Lebanon War of 1982, which some people said they questioned Begin's timing. They questioned whether it was necessary. I actually believe, and historically we've seen that it was necessary too. But if we look at those two categories, October 7th, clearly everybody believed this is a war of ein brera, this is an existential war. As it dragged on, people started doubting Netanyahu and started saying, oh, he has his own political agendas, and it became more of a Lebanon mess. This war, 90% of Israelis are supporting. This war, we should also point out, started just days after Netanyahu survived no confidence vote, which gave him 6 more months. So you can't even say this is for politics. And I think in the Jewish world, especially today when we're all or nothing, I'm calling on my critics of Bibi Netanyahu, my Zionist critics of Bibi Netanyahu, my people who can't stand Bibi Netanyahu, to say, yes, I disagree with what he's doing in Gaza. Yes, I think he hasn't done enough for the hostages. But on this one, he's right. And turn to their allies. I don't want this all or nothing. Let's live with the complexity. And let's live with people who have criticized Netanyahu, but like 90% of Israelis say this is enough. Now, the bigger issue is this. And here I think I just have to tell you again, I'm not just amazed by what I used to call the grown-ups of Montreal, but the kids, the young people. On Friday night, my son-in-law, Yona, who's related to the Jamie Shear family and the Pupko clan, and my daughter, Leah, and I violated all the rules to stay at home. And with my wife's permission, my wife Linda's permission, who sends love, we went downtown to host a group of 15 non-Jews, think tankers, Washington think tankers, all in their, sports jackets in their 20s and 30s, who were at a hotel, the Ayal Hotel downtown, who were stuck. And we felt that it was important, with all due respect to the Hanchayot, the rules, that we get there in order to give them some kind of a Shabbat experience. 14 of the 15 were not Jewish. And of course, we went up and down and up and down and up and down. Dov and Marnie, you can tell us how many sirens there were that night. In that same hotel was a birthright group from Montreal. And I've got to tell you, downstairs in the bowels of that hotel, it was hot. They turned on the air conditioning about 5 minutes at the end of the hour and a half where we were there. They started singing and dancing. And my 14 non-Jews, proper Washingtonians, are looking at this. And of course, what did they do? They waved us in. And I pulled them along. And you could see at first how awkward and anxious they were. And then they got swept up. And I said, wow, that's Montreal. That's our future. Those are the kids and grandkids you have raised. And that's our moment now. This is the jiu-jitsu. We have enemies. But we can learn from our enemies who not to be and what not to do. And what we can really learn is what I call Pilates. We can strengthen our core. This is our moment. And I see how much you guys are investing in the future, in Hillel, in identity building. I see that you understand it, because right now we are defining the community not just of 2025, but of 2045 and of 2065. And we are making sure that those Jews who, I said to Marnie and Dov before the phone call, these kids are going to remember these moments for the rest of their lives. And these are defining moments when you know who you are. And you find out, wow, I could feel really anxious right now. I could feel really lonely right now. But how can I, when I have amazing people like you thinking about me and hugging me and helping me out? When we know that we're a part of this amazing nation, when we know we're part of this amazing community, when we know that we're part of this family, a family of strangers who aren't strangers. Wow, that is the most powerful feeling in the world. And that's why, and I lift out my hand to IDL, who's doing amazing work, because there are many people, of course, who are anxious. There are many people who, of course, who are broken. But last night on Israeli television, there was this great exchange with a psychologist. And the psychologist said, well, these are ways to deal with anxiety. And the TV host said, what are you talking about? Like, okay, so you're anxious in this moment, but next minute it's terrifying too. And he said, well, let's make a distinction between pachad and charada. Let's make a distinction between fear and anxiety. You're crazy if you're not scared. It's scary. But anxiety is staying in the moment. And he said many things we heard from IDL and many things we heard from Dov and Marnie. By acting, by reacting, by connecting, by feeling a part of something bigger than yourself, you have a chance not to be stuck in anxiety, but to have the fears and overcome them. And that's what we also have to teach our kids at McGill and at Concordia, our holy warriors there. And they too understand that if they are paralyzed, they're lost. By acting, reacting, and singing and dancing. And that's the energy I felt downstairs in those catacombs. And that those 15 Washingtonians are now imported back to Washington because they got out on the next boat to Ashdod, from Ashdod to Larnaca on Saturday morning. That's our future. And those kids were jazzed by your kids. They learned something from those birthriders, that we won't stop singing, we won't stop dancing, we won't stop being who we are.
Amen, Gil. Amen, amen. And to all those on the call, I often say that the Montreal Jewish community is built on the shoulders of heroes and giants that have had the foresight to build a community that, number one, is resilient, that puts its feet where they need to go and in the right direction, and moves in that direction, and still do. And I think that's part of the part of the magic of what we're seeing in Montreal, and Montreal's influence in other communities. Gil, any final thoughts in terms of how does this come to an end? We're here today, and I don't know how much longer Israel can withstand 100 ballistic missiles a night, in terms of just ammunition to shoot it down. And again, no predictions, but how do you see a possibility, I don't want to say out of this, but bring this to a conclusion?
Now, let's think about it. There are four scenarios really that seem to be ahead of us. Number one, Donald Trump and the Americans step in, and they keep very focused, and they destroy the remaining nuclear structure, and we all declare it a day. That's scenario number one. That's the fantasy scenario. Fantasy scenario number two, now may happen, but fantasy scenario number two is that because we really have humiliated the regime. By the way, look how terrified everybody was of what ultimately has turned out to be, as my son called it, a paper tiger. Look at how weak they are. Look at how disorganized they are. So fantasy number two, again, not prediction, is that the regime itself collapses. So those are the two fantasies that everybody's juggling. Scenario 3 and 4 are the more likely ones. Scenario 3 is that Israel at a certain point says, okay, we have air supremacy, which, by the way, it took the Russians 3 years over Ukraine to not achieve it, and we achieved it in 2 days. And if you read military analysts, they're not just talking about air superiority, they're talking about air supremacy, which is huge, because our pilots can do what they need to do. And I just saw that they said that we have a bank, that's the military term, a bank of yadim, of goals, of achievements, and that we're going through that list much faster than we thought. And so even if we don't completely eviscerate the nuclear program, and even if Iran doesn't completely collapse, I think there's a scenario where we can say, okay, we wanted to do A, B, C, D, E through, I'll speak Canadian, Z. We did it, and it's done. The dangerous scenario, the scary scenario, is scenario 4, that they have enough. As you say, every night, they don't need 100, 2, 3, 4 ballistic missiles, and that we get stuck in a slog. And that's why it is so important that you not only give dollars and give love, but that all of you as a community think about what kind of pressure can you put on the Canadian government and those of you with ties to the American government to make sure that we don't get stuck in a slog. We, on the Israeli side, have to make sure that our leaders are smart and understand that this is a war not to kind of be a forever war, to use the American term, but a war to solve a problem. And if we've degraded them enough, then we can declare victory and go home. But that's the thing we really have to avoid. And that takes leadership from within. It takes military success, which I think we've had so far. And it also takes an international community that doesn't just whisper, thank you, but really thanks us by helping us out.
Gil, I can't thank you enough. I know I said it's the last question, but and I see Ali came back, and I want to give him a few minutes, but I don't know what the number is. It's over 600 days that we've had hostages in the underbelly of Gaza, held by Hamas and other terrorist groups. Just how do we see that tying in? Is there a lever here that can? Because again, I'm not making this a political statement. It is gut-wrenching to even think about 600 days plus in those conditions, and we've seen how hostages are returning. Anything that this could lead to a result there?
Look, the expression is the head of the snake. Already, the weakened Iran has improved the chances of bringing the 20 or so who are alive home. Already, the humiliation and the degradation of the regime, because this is not, I mean, Iranians are not stupid, and the Arab world isn't stupid, and Hamasniks aren't stupid. And the pro-Palestinians outside of Israel and the Middle East, not so sure. But the people on the inside are seeing the degree to which Israel has degraded Hamas, crushed Hezbollah, led to the collapse of Syria, and now helped look, helped make the mullahs look ridiculous. The more we weaken them, the weaker they look. First of all, if you're Khamenei right now, the Ayatollah, what are you focusing on? You're not focusing on helping Hamas. You're focusing on how do I keep my head connected to my neck? How do I make sure that I'm not the next one on the target list? And how do I hold on to this evil, corrupt regime of mine? And so what we're seeing actually now is, because this was always interconnected, because if we go back, you mentioned the JCPOA, the Obama nuclear deal, which from the start I felt was poorly negotiated and included hundreds of millions of dollars going to the Iranians, which ended up in Hamas's pockets, which helped kill 1,200 people on October 7th and helped keep the hostages for the last 620 days. It's interconnected, and I'm not Mr. Conspiracy Head. And so the more we weaken the head of the snake, and if we're ultimately able to see the Iranian people cut off the head of the snake, the faster we have a chance of having Qatar get nervous and put the pressure on Hamas, and Hamas get nervous, and ultimately bringing the hostages home and coming to there'll never be a happy ending to this story because it's been so heartbreaking. But to at least the conclusion that those holy hostages and their families and our reservists and our soldiers and their wives and their husbands and their kids and their parents so deeply deserve. But we're close. Think about where we were a year ago. And with this, I'll end because I know you have more important things to do. Just think of how nervous we were a year ago about Hezbollah. You were in Israel and, everybody had vats of water and their little way of keeping electricity going. Everybody knew that Hezbollah was going to destroy us. Everybody couldn't even articulate the fears of Iran. And look how much, with all the pain and suffering, how much we've accomplished. And look how our holy soldiers and our holy reservists and their families have, again, not just saved Israel, they've saved Canada. And I'll wait for Canada ultimately to realize it.
Gil, as usual, incredible speaking with you. I learned so much. I love hearing the way you frame things. We have actually transformed the Middle East, right? That's the reality. And it might take a generation to actually acknowledge that. But as I remember very clearly, Dick Cheney signing that photograph. And I remember that moment because I was in Israel in 1982, living there. I recall the euphoria that happened when we just got to Iraq. I can't even imagine how it's been to understand that air supremacy is taking place over Iran. It's just incredible. So, Gil, on behalf of all of us, thank you so much. As usual, I look forward to your son coming to Montreal and joining us here. So a little bit of good news. Yoni will be joining us, taking on a leadership position at Hillel, working with our students, which is just going to bring such good stuff for our future. And again, hopefully I look forward to seeing you this summer in Israel still. God willing, there's a channel for me to get there, and otherwise, I'll always look forward to seeing you anywhere in the world.
And hopefully there'll be many speaking gigs for me in Montreal so I can come visit my kids.
We will arrange it, and we'll pack the house. I can promise you that.
Amen.
So on behalf of everyone on the screen and the Montreal Jewish community that has joined us, thank you all for being here today, for listening. Gil said it best, our prayers are for Am Yisrael, for our reservists. And really today, I never actually thought about it, our pilots who are doing things and are in places that we don't even know where they are on the map. So may they all return home safely to their families, to all the families that are having to live through this, whether their kids or spouses are away and businesses that are closed, all these things that we're going through. And yet, like Alia said, and Gil, it's a historic moment for the Jewish people. And we will be stronger, we are resilient, and we'll continue to do everything we can to make sure that Am Yisrael Chai V'Kayam. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for listening. To find out more about the work we do at Federation CJA, the impact we have on the Montreal Jewish community in Israel and around the world, visit us at federationcja.org, on Facebook, and on Instagram. Until next time, Shalom.